Sometimes the quietest moments speak the loudest to us. He built the company on my signature and buried me under it.
I was scrubbing a coffee stain off the glass wall of the office I designed myself when Marcus Doyle walked past without a second glance. He didn't recognize me. 3 years ago, this floor had my name on the lease. Now I wore a gray polo with a company logo I once picked out, and I pushed a cleaning cart down the same hallway where I used to run board meetings. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and this is how I got my company back. I co-founded Harlow Analytics with Marcus when we were both 26, working out of a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 laptops and 1 working printer. I wrote the original code. He handled the pitch decks. We split the company 50-50, and for 6 years, that arrangement worked. We grew from 3 employees to 61. We landed a contract with a regional hospital network worth $4 million a year. My father, Walter Whitmore, had lent us our first $18,000 in seed money he'd saved from 30 years running a hardware store. He believed in me before anyone else did, and every time Harlow hit a new milestone, I called him first. Then I got married. My husband, Nathaniel Pierce, was kind and steady, an architect who never once asked me to choose between the company and our life together. His mother, Judith Pierce, was a different story. Judith had opinions about everything, especially about a daughter-in-law who worked past 9 most nights and flew to investor meetings instead of hosting holiday dinners. She never said it outright, but she implied, again and again, that a woman who cared so much about a company would eventually lose everything that mattered. I didn't listen to her. I should have listened to the numbers instead. It started small. An invoice for consulting services I hadn't approved. A line item labeled strategic advisory that routed $40,000 to a shell company I'd never heard of. When I asked Marcus about it, he waved it off as a vendor relationship he was managing personally, something he'd explain later. I let it go. We were closing our Series B round, and I didn't want friction with my co-founder during due diligence. 6 months later, I found a second document. A shareholder agreement amendment dated during a week I'd been in London for a conference, restructuring my equity from 50% down to 12%. My signature was on it. I never signed it. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I hired a forensic document examiner named Priya Anand, quietly, using a personal account Marcus had no visibility into. We met at a diner 40 minutes outside the city, never the same one twice, always paying in cash. I brought her printouts in a gym bag instead of a briefcase, because a briefcase would have looked deliberate, and I had gotten very good, by then, at looking like nothing was wrong. It took her 11 weeks to build a full report. 3 forged signatures, 2 backdated board resolutions, and a pattern of wire transfers totaling nearly $1.1 million over 2 years, funneled through a company controlled by Marcus's cousin, Trevor Doyle, who'd been consulting for us since our 4th year. Priya walked me through the signature analysis line by line, showing me where my pen pressure changed mid-stroke on the forged pages, where the ink batch didn't match anything I'd used that month. It was strange, seeing my own name turned into evidence, like watching a stranger wear my face. I kept a second phone for the 11 weeks that report took shape, a prepaid one I bought with cash at a drugstore 2 towns over. I used it only to text Priya, and twice, to call my father when I needed to hear a voice that had nothing to do with Harlow Analytics. I never told Nathaniel the full extent of it, not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed at least one part of my life to stay untouched by what I was building toward. I also learned who else knew. Renata Sloan, our head of operations, had flagged one of the invoices to Marcus directly and been quietly reassigned to a satellite office in Ohio a month later. A junior accountant named Beth Okafor had asked questions about the shell company and was let go for budget reasons 8 weeks after that. Neither of them had proof. I did. For 4 months, I said nothing to anyone at the company. I kept showing up, kept smiling in meetings, kept letting Marcus believe I hadn't noticed a thing. There were nights I sat in my car in the parking garage after everyone had left, just breathing, just reminding myself that a confrontation in the moment would only give him time to cover his tracks further. Judith called it stubbornness when Nathaniel mentioned I seemed distracted. It wasn't stubbornness, it was patience. I was waiting for the board's annual governance review, the one meeting each year where every signature, every equity adjustment, and every vendor contract from the previous 12 months had to be certified under oath by both founders. I spent those 4 months quietly reinforcing everything I could without tipping my hand. I moved company backups to a server Marcus didn't administer. I asked our outside counsel, under the guise of routine housekeeping, to review our original founding documents for an audit. I built a private folder of everything Priya found, mirrored across 2 accounts he had no access to. If he sensed anything, he never showed it. Marcus had always believed I was too focused on the product to notice the business side of things, and for 4 months, I let him keep believing that. Marcus scheduled that meeting for a Thursday in March. I brought Priya's full report, notarized copies of the original, unaltered shareholder agreement, and a letter from an employment attorney outlining exactly how retaliation against Renata and Beth violated 3 separate statutes. I called my father the night before. "I found it, Dad," I told him. "All of it." He was quiet for a long moment, and then he said the same thing he'd said the day he handed me that first check 18 years ago. "Then go get what's yours." The board meeting lasted 11 minutes before Marcus's own attorney asked to step outside with him. By Friday afternoon, Marcus had been removed as an officer of the company pending investigation. By the following Tuesday, 2 other board members who'd rubber-stamped the amendment without verifying it resigned rather than face questions about their own negligence. Marcus showed up at my house on a Wednesday night, still in his work clothes, his voice doing that thing it always did when he wanted something soft and reasonable, like we were still just 2 kids splitting a printer bill. "Eleanor, we built this together. You're really going to let a piece of paper end that?" "Oh." "You ended it," I said, "the day you forged my name." He tried a different angle. "Your father put in $18,000. I put in years of my life." "So did I," I said. "The difference is I never lied about it." He left without another word. Judith, of all people, called me 2 days later, her tone clipped and careful. "I heard what happened," she said. "I suppose I owe you an apology. It wasn't much, and it came 4 years too late, but I let her have it. Some things don't need to be settled, only acknowledged." The fallout moved fast once the evidence was public. Trevor's shell company was dissolved within a month under a settlement that required full repayment of the diverted funds. 2 investors who'd sided with Marcus during the ugliest weeks quietly sold their stakes and stopped returning my calls, which suited me fine. A lawsuit Marcus's attorney threatened to file, alleging I damaged his reputation. Never made it past a first filing. There's very little room to argue reputational harm when the underlying facts are notarized. Word moved through the industry the way it always does, in careful half-sentences at conferences and in messages that started with "I heard." A competitor who tried to poach 2 of our engineers during the chaos quietly backed off once the real story surfaced. A journalist who covered regional tech news reached out for comment, and I gave her exactly 4 sentences, none of them dramatic, all of them true. I had learned by then that the calmest version of the story was also the most damning one. I reinstated Renata as head of operations and gave Beth her job back with 2 years of back pay. We hired an outside compliance officer, the kind of hire I should have insisted on years earlier. And revenue actually grew 7% in the 2 quarters following Marcus's departure. Once clients realized the company they'd trusted was finally being run the way I'd always intended it to be run. My father came to the office for the first time in 3 years the week the board confirmed me as sole controlling shareholder. He walked the same floor I used to mop in my mind during those long months of silence. And he stopped at the glass wall near my office, the one I'd once cleaned wearing a uniform with someone else's logo on it, and he just nodded, the way he used to when I brought home a report card he was proud of. I stood at that same wall a year later, in my own clothes, on my own floor, watching the sun come up over a company that finally, fully, belonged to the woman who built it.